Woof. That's all I can say about this movie. I just got back and I just saw Professor Marston and the Wonder Woman, and this movie is directed by Angela Robinson. I'm not too familiar with Angela Robinson. However, this film is starring a couple of actors and actresses that I actually do recognize. That being Luke Evans. If you don't know who that is already, I mean, he's Dracula Untold. He is Bard in the new Hobbit films. He's also in the newest Beauty and the Beast as Gaston, as well as Rebecca Hall, who I recognize in The Town with Ben Affleck, and I also recognize her in The Gift. But anyways, I digress. Let's talk a little bit about this film. So let's talk about Professor Marston and the Wonder Woman. This movie is, like I said before, woof. This movie is definitely it's definitely a crazy film, but it's also a biopic of the people who Professor Marston himself, Luke Evans' character, who created Wonder Woman and all the things that they have had to deal with. But by the way, I forgot to mention one very vital character as well, and that person is Bella Heathcote, who plays the third lead role in this film. And let me explain a little bit of the summary. I'm going to only briefly talk about the setup of this film. I'm talking about some of the pros and some of the cons and some of the theatrical and thematic aspects of this film, and whether or not you should check this movie out. The movie starts off with Luke Evans being kind of just questioned constantly. It looks like a kind of a blacklisting kind of thing. This happened during the 1940s with Wonder Woman, in particular with Wonder Woman, because there was a lot of issues, particularly with a certain group of women, Catholic women, and just American society as a whole. They just saw a lot of this stuff as this is disgusting. There's this woman in this bathing suit, pretty much using all these bondage techniques, and also just all of these things that are just seem to be submissive and also just at the same time empowering. There was a lot of mixed messages that a lot of people were really misconstruing with this. So Luke Evans was defending himself against this board, pretty much, who are calling out all his work. However, it kind of just goes back and forth between that moment when he's doing that, and in the past where it all unfolded. And so Luke Evans plays Professor Marston, and with his wife, who's also not a professor. However, she pretty much has all the credentials to be a professor, but obviously in the 1900s and the early 1900s, women weren't allowed to get their doctorate, their PhD. And so there's some witty one-liners there with Elizabeth's character, and I thought that was really hilarious. A lot of the really snarky and snappy one-liners that she had. But these characters are, it seems like they get along super well. Obviously they're husband and wife, and they get along super well. But it starts off, they're in this classroom. Luke Evans is teaching, I'm going to keep calling him Luke Evans, Professor Marston keeps teaching, he's teaching this group of women, and you see the character of, you see the student of Olive, who is pretty much wants to be their assistant, pretty much, because what they've noticed is Luke Evans' character, again, woof, I just keep messing up every single time, but I'm going to keep this in. So Professor Marston is attracted to Olive in some way, and also at the same time, very, very beginning, the wife is a little jealous, but also at the same time really a little intrigued, because they're both obviously researchers and they're both really into understanding the psychology of some things. And so I remember early on in this film, and I'm not really giving anything away, the wife comes and tells the assistant, Olive, pretty much, hey, like, it's nice to meet you, but I just want you to know, if we're going to do this, just don't fuck my husband. And immediately from that point on, she's like, what? I'm like, no, I'm not, this is awkward. And then she meets Luke Evans a little bit later on, and pretty much it's this awkward encounter, and then the next scene after that is just, they come together and they're like, all right, so let's talk down. I'm sorry that I told you you shouldn't fuck my husband. And they kind of worked it all out. It was a pretty silly scene, and it was one of the best scenes in the movie that I recall. However, so it starts off from there, and they develop this love triangle that occurs throughout this film, and a lot of it happens to be dealing with bondage, with submission, with these different characteristics of who's in power, who's dominant, who's submissive, but also at the same time, this is really empowering at the same time for women. And there's a lot of these mixed messages that a lot of the characters have to entangle in their webs, really just in their lives, and also just the society that they live in, especially in the early 1900s and in the 1920s and 30s, when a lot of this is going on. they have to deal with a lot of the pressures of society. So like I said, it keeps going back and forth to this interrogation of Dr. Marston, Professor Marston, and he has to deal with all this. So that's the setup of the movie. So some of the pros of this movie is I thought this was brilliantly acted. I could tell the chemistry was really, really well done in this film. A lot of the love sequences between each of these characters were just, to me, like, it was very relatable, but also at the same time, it seemed like a fantasy. A lot of these love sequences seemed like it could be a real thing, and I really liked that. It captured the time period really, really, really well, and I think that a lot of the characters in this film really were kind of in this Dionysian kind of pleasure zone where they kept thinking that they lived outside of society in some capacity, and they were away from society. And this is just like how he set up Wonder Woman, living on this paradise, this island that Wonder Woman is from, and then all of a sudden mankind comes in crashing down and then crashes their whole entire party. So it seems like a really great metaphor for the symbolism of the people who created Wonder Woman, especially Professor Marsden, and then also what their actual life was about. And it seems so strange, this triangle and love. And one thing that I thought was really, really interesting of this film was Professor Marsden and, honestly, his wife, and then also Olive. They just constantly, this was, you know, a love triangle, but it was all equal. And a lot of the times that they kept going back and forth. And I don't really want to go too in depth with that. However, I thought it was really interesting, the power dynamics in this film. But that also leads me to some of the cons of this film. And I don't think all these cons are actually bad, but it kind of paints the picture of, this is a very ambiguous kind of film where it just kind of lives, like I said, it lives in the clouds. So this paradise island that Wonder Woman lives on, and also their love that lives on, really can't work in reality. And a lot of the things I think in this film that are maybe a little detrimental, but also at the same time it takes artistic liberty, which I think is really great. So I actually think this is probably more of a pro than a con. So I take my words back there. I think that's more of a pro. But at the same time, a lot of this is, you don't see this kind of relationship in reality too often, where there's a love triangle and they all love each other and pretty equally, and it seems almost like fiction, which just is like what Wonder Woman is. So a couple of the cons of the film, one particularly, it kind of ties into what I was just saying, the believability of it. I know this happened in real life, however, I don't know how much Hollywoodized it is, obviously, and so the believability of it has, you know, I don't think a lot of the relationships that happen between more than one person really work out in the end, because someone's going to become jealous, someone's gonna ruin something, and it portrayed that pretty well in the film. Another thing is, I can tell probably with a lot of the audience members who probably aren't used to these types of films. This reminds me a lot of movies such as Danish Girl or Moonlight, where it tackles a societal issue, but obviously this is a very historic issue. But I can tell some people might not like some of the messaging behind some of this, and because this one deals with a lot of polygamous type of relationships, and it's very strange for a lot of people really to accept, but also at the same time understand. And so I don't know if that could potentially be a con for somebody, but I thought this movie was actually really, really well done. I thought this was one of the better biopics of this year so far. I thought that Luke Evans did a fantastic job. I think the entire cast, I think Elizabeth and Olive did a really fantastic job as their respective characters as well. And I thought this really brought together what Wonder Woman was eventually to become, and I thought this was a really, really well done biopic. And I think this is something that I think everyone should definitely check out. I give this movie a 4 out of 5. I definitely say go watch this movie. Even if it makes you uncomfortable, I think this is a film worth watching. So let me know your thoughts down below of what you thought about my review. And I want to hear your thoughts if you've seen this movie or not, or willing to check it out. And I want to hear your thoughts down below on that. And give me a like, comment, share, and don't forget to subscribe. And I'll see you next time. I'm not jonesing around.